Rick was born on the Blood Reserve in southern Alberta and was educated at St. Paul's Schools. He began working for Indian news media in 1977 as a news reporter and then moved into producing. He also wrote a column in Kainai News called Buffalo Chips. In 1982, he shifted into the video production department of Indian news media and produced many well-received works. In 1987 and 1988, he was recognized with 2 awards from the National Aboriginal Communities Society for his productions, Boarding School Blues and Two-Way Street. He was part of the team to create the magazine Tsinikssini. Rick recently retired from Blood Tribe Communications. He and his wife Sharon have 2 sons, 1 daughter, and several grandchildren. Okay, Rick, maybe you could, I was really impressed when I saw your awards. I don't think too many people remember that or know about that. Maybe just start with some background on yourself, and then that'll lead to us to other questions.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Yeah, I'm honored to be presenting this clip on the Blood Tribe communications development and a bit of the history. I first started with Indigenous communications, as Linda said, in 1977 as a radio reporter. We produced radio programs, a weekly radio program in the Blackfoot language. And at the time, we were trying to update the community members, and also the Treaty 7 Native population. There was a broadcast we did from Calgary, but that started the process of journalism that I was involved in for so many years. When I first began as a Native journalist in radio, there was really no involvement with the mainstream media at the time. Radio, the newspaper, local newspapers, there was no such thing as electronic media, except for the, those were pretty, I guess, early production on radio and also on TV. What we wanted to do was to keep up with the development of technology and use that to present, news, information, communications to the members of the Indigenous community in southern Alberta. So, journalism has changed a lot in the last 40 years. Nowadays you can exchange news, share news so instantly, and with the smartphones, it's incredible how quickly you can get news out onto the internet. However, the print media is still exists, and which is much slower. But when you look at the population of Native people, not everybody can do the internet, and not everybody has cell phones, and people still like to have hard copies of articles and news. And Nitsipepiopi Native people, as we are, we're very graphic, and we like to see pictures and feel them and hold them and file them away for future use. So that's when we first started, we were focused on print media, and there was a newspaper at the time called Kainai News, which started in 1968. It was through it was called the Secretary of State, which was a department within the federal government. And part of their mandate was to promote communications in Indigenous communities. And that was our goal, was to use technology to communicate. But, when you look at it, essentially, journalism is storytelling. That's the basis of journalism. And as Native people, we've always been very, storytelling was a big part of our culture. There was, all types of storytelling. Information was passed from one generation to the other. And then that's how a lot of our culture was being passed down to younger generations. So, storytelling is a big part of it. And in the old days, pre-contact days, there was not a written language. Most Indigenous tribes didn't have a written language. So a lot of the stories have been recorded in petroglyphs, in rocks, and those stories have passed on for thousands of years. The main one that I refer to is the Tsinikssini. It's the writing on stone park, I guess it is now, but there's an area around Milk River when the Blackfoot went south to go on war raids. They would stop at the Tsinikssini, and they would before they leave, there was a pool in the rock where you would look at yourself and see your reflection of yourself, your face. And if your hair was white, if it had turned white in the reflection, then it meant that you were going to be back. You were going to come back. But if you didn't, if you showed the reflection of yourself the way you look, then it was a sign that you might not come back from the south. So they continued on. Some people turned back if the signs weren't right, but others would continue. And if they were on a successful raid, a lot of times they went down as far as Mexico to get horses and bring the horses back. And when they returned, they would stop again at the Tsinikssini, and they would tell their story in the rocks. And that was, that was storytelling in its very primitive form. But, that's what storytelling is. There was no paper, but that was a certain degree of journalism that was going on. So, of course, times have changed, and communications in most Native communities is pretty low key because we don't have the resources to do magazines or newspapers or TV shows, those types of things. It's sad to see it, but we don't have participation in mainstream media. So, back in those years in 1968, that was pretty much all that was available was the radio show and the newspaper. Some of the early journalists, which is pretty significant, the late Everett Soop, he was a frontier in Aboriginal media, and he was behind a lot of the information that you would read in the Kainai news. And then also Jim Goodstriker. He was the sports reporter, and he followed rodeos, hockey games. So he was providing sports information in the Kainai news. And they were just pretty much blazing the trail for other journalists that came along. And, you know, it was tough to fit into this mainstream media. But Everett and Jim Goodstriker, and also Caan Bly, and I would have to mention also Jackie Red Crow. They were previous editors of the newspaper, but they were blazing the trail for other productions and other journalists going out there and telling the stories of Indigenous communities, which I think is really good, you know, to have a presence. There's a number of issues that happen with mainstream media. And one of those is Indigenous people tend to be stuck into this a rut where the mainstream media isn't interested in anything in the Native community unless it's a negative news story, because those negative news stories end up on the front page. And we were bombarded with all kinds of news like that, where it portrayed the Bloods, the Kainai, as being, you know, there's a lot of dysfunction in the community. And, you know, it's an image that most Native people weren't, and they weren't happy with those kinds of stories. It was always bad news. And the newspapers, the TV stations, that's what they sold a lot of their papers on, was what's on the headlines. So we ended up with negative stories. So part of the goal of Indian news media was to also show some positive things that happen in the Native community, you know, achievements that have been made, and not just the stories of, you know, of bad news that happens. So that was one thing that, you know, it was very strong at the time. People related to it. And of course, there was a lot of humor that was brought out by Everett Soop. He was a cartoonist and columnist, and through humor, he was able to bring out issues, political issues with the federal government. There was a lot of cartoons about the RCMP chasing Native people, stories about government. At the time, it was Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, and there was a lot of cartoons, you know, showing the, I guess, the Native people's concerns and how we're not getting to the Prime Minister. He's not getting the message. Anyways, you know, it ended up very funny that, you know, Everett, he was brilliant in finding these things that could turn up as cartoons. And even about his own Native people, we were able to laugh at ourselves, which is, you know, very strong in the Native culture. And Jim Goodstriker as well. He was he attended all kinds of events, and people were, if you got your picture in Kainai News and you were a barrel racer or you were a bronc rider, a hockey player, you know, that sort of promoted positive sports images for the Indigenous community. So it's really important, you know, storytelling is part of the fiber of a community. If you're not able to tell your stories, then, you know, the community is at the loss. You know, we don't know what's going on. the serious news that you see in mainstream media, but you want to see what's going on in our backyard. So at the moment, you know, the Blood Reserve has, there's a newspaper, it's a privately owned newspaper, Ape Tsinikssini. It's been going for a long time. And, you know, it's really healthy for us to have our own media. Then also there's the Last Star Radio, which has been around for a long time. I would say maybe 30 years. It's been broadcasting. So, you know, the Blood Reserve has those two media outlets, as well as the, you know, the mainstream media, TV, radio. So, you know, that's pretty healthy so far. And then, of course, we now have the internet. We have smartphones. So the news is changing a little bit. A lot of news is now on the on social media, and then the news organizations often pick up clips from you know, social media posts. So right now it's changing as we speak. You know, it's getting so fast. They're improving the cameras on these smartphones. You can almost shoot, you know, some event going on, and it'll be very high quality that the news organizations can use it. So that's pretty much where we're at with, you know, we've progressed, but, you know, it's changing, and I don't know where it's going. You know, I really don't know where technology is going, but so far, you know, you know, Indigenous people are taking advantage of, they left the moccasin telegraph. Now they're using smartphones, which is much faster.
I'm really glad you mentioned Everett Soop and Jim Goodstriker. I had the opportunity to work with Jim at Kainai Board of Education for a bit before he passed on. So that was, I mean, yeah, Jim Goodstriker. And he was really, he used to produce our little newspaper for KBE, for Kainai Board of Education.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember he'd really keep after us to make sure we got stories in. And since he stepped away, various people, including myself, tried to take it over, and it's quite a hefty responsibility to get those stories out.
I know it's a tough job, you know, and you know, communications, I think, is key in good governance. You know, transparency by government, that includes our own chief and council, provincial government, the federal government. You know, if we don't have that transparency in our governance, we're in the dark. We don't know what's happening. What did the chief and council do? What's Justin Trudeau doing? You know, a lot of that happens, but in some cases not enough. You know, the transparency has to be very deep in order to, you know, there's our leaders here on Kainai, they make decisions, you know, that sometimes we don't hear about. But I think, you know, they need to have that opportunity. That the new council has been sitting for at least about 4 months, I think. And I think they are aware of it. There has to be transparency in order to keep the members of the tribe informed. And I think that's really important. That was one of the main goals, Everett Soop, if there was no transparency, he picked it up right away. And, you know, the governing council or whoever's in leadership, if, you know, if they don't respond in a positive way, then they end up being, you know, appearing to be guilty of, you know, not sharing information. And when I worked with the Blood Tribe communications, I worked for about 20 years working with the tribe, and we tried to, you know, create a two-way communication with the outside media, with the community members, and we started a magazine, Tsinikssini. Tsinikssini in Blackfoot means the news or the stories. And Tsinikssini is a really common word when you want to hear stories, you know, even about your family, you know, Tsinikssini, Atinikyo, that means we're sharing the stories. So that magazine, it was, it went for quite a long time. We produced everything in-house. We did the graphics, the photos. We worked with Tom Russell. He's an excellent journalist. Myron Fox, he was our technician. We had a small group, but we were able to produce the magazine every month for about 9 years. It was nonprofit. And then, yeah, then it stopped. When I left the BTA, it stopped, and we haven't seen a magazine since then. So we're at a bit of a loss because we still need the print media, but it's not happening. Just the Apetstapi, the newspaper, is doing an excellent job. But right now, a lot of that information should be going online so other people can see it. Right now, it's just in print media. But yeah, that could easily change. One of the problems we face on the reserve is we don't have the resources to develop, you know, really high caliber, you know, media productions, you know, in radio or TV. But yeah, that's one of the challenges we face in our community, is getting accurate news and also getting the outside community to see us in a more positive light, you know, rather than the negative news that we sometimes end up with.
When I started at the Lethbridge Public Library, I would pick up about 10 copies of the magazine, and they would just, people would just get them, take them. I tried to save a copy for myself, but even some of those people really wanted to read it. And in the city, in the urban setting, they really wanted to read that magazine. And because, you know, they said, well, we don't know what's really going on and stuff. And they would see a relative, oh, come look at this. My relatives are in here. My grandchild did this, or, you know,
Yeah.
so it was a really, and then when the last issue came out, it was, I believe it was focusing on the plants, and I think that's what it was. And I think I managed to keep a copy for myself, so I'm not giving it up. Because to me, that's the kind of stuff I'm interested in. So I really wanted a copy of that. And so, yeah, I wanted to go back to something you said, because as you know, I'm I'm from the Salish tribe in the States. And in the last year and a half since the pandemic started, they've been doing Zoom meetings. You can click on and get in and watch their Zoom meetings. And I often wondered, I wonder if the Blood Tribe that would really be transparent. There's some, of course, that they can't do. They call them in-committee meetings or in-camera meetings. And so they don't show those because those are, private things with different individuals. But the general business is right there. You can go back, look at it on Facebook. So I wonder, maybe we will start a letter writing campaign and have them do that on Facebook. It's an
I know
idea.
it's there was we tried to do you know we tried to stream council meetings, what you said, meetings that are for general public. They're not personal, confidential meetings. But there's a problem that happens with the previous council before that I worked with. They didn't want their pictures to be, in that way, like to be in a meeting. And they had always unplugged us and said, sorry, we can't do this meeting. But we did do a few events that were happened in the council chambers. The camera, and it's probably still sitting there right now, but we had set it up so that it had a view of all the council, most of the council. And in the process of the council meeting, there was nothing fancy, but you could see and hear what they were saying. And that's what we were trying to do, to share that with more people. But there's problems with that. Not every council wants the outside community to be involved, to know about what the council's doing or what the tribe is doing. They didn't want to share it, so it was difficult. And I don't know if that's changed, but it would be excellent if you could stream a meeting from council. And right now the technology is there, it's easy to do. But yeah, something that has to remain with the council, and if they want to do it, they can easily do it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people running in this last election did talk about transparency, and they're probably just getting their feet wet, the new ones, because there's quite a few new ones. But it's an opportunity that could be presented by maybe a group of people and say, this would be a good idea. Like you said, things are changing, progressing. Maybe that's one of the things that could be talked about. Yeah.
Well, in my experience with working with that, with broadcasts from council chambers, so sometimes the members get oversensitive or they're upset, and they start to make calls to the council. Why did you do that? Or why didn't you do this? And well, what can you do? The council deals with what they can. And that's a fear that lies with any sitting council is, geez, people are going to attack me if I say this, or, and it happens because in the past we used to have these band meetings. They're like town, what do you call those? Anyways, the council sits before the group, of members.
Oh, yeah,
of
town
everyone.
hall.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a town hall meeting. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
they would, it was very hard to control the crowd that came into because they would make allegations. And some people would even almost end up getting hostile, and there was no control. So that's a danger that happens with every council. People get upset, and it's hard to make everybody happy. But you know, if you don't do the right thing, then you pay for it at these town hall meetings. And it's very
Yeah, that's true. You know, the sometimes the element of respect uh, vanishes when people are emotionally involved with stuff. So I guess that's something that, you know, they would have to say, okay, we need to be respectful and and agree to disagree. I don't know how that would carry over because people are who they are. But yeah, I see that a lot, especially there's a few opinion pages on Facebook that I sometimes wonder, why are they saying this? It's really disrespectful. I don't, you know, but then I suppose if I was involved in that, I would be right in there too, for all I know. You know, I mean,
yeah.
hopefully not, but you know, you never know because it's affecting you personally. And like you said, our resources are here and people are lacking this and that. And so, yeah, I could see where that could be a real extreme problem.
And you know, also
But yeah.
the Indigenous communities, there was a new word that just came up. I don't know if it's probably not in the dictionary, but it was introduced by former President Donald Trump. It's fake
Oh,
news. You know, it's
fake
fake news.
news, yeah.
And I don't know where that came from, but you know, I think that's part of propaganda. You know, when you introduce information that's not reliable, and you know, in journalism, anywhere on the reserve, anywhere, journalism has to have some integrity, you know, and
Yeah,
credibility to be neutral and to look at all angles and hear the stories of both sides. You know, if there's a conflict, well, you know,
mhm,
it's not very credible information unless you have both sides of the story and comments from both. And that's
yeah,
one thing that, you know, when you have fake news, then I don't know, somebody's not telling the real information. You know, it can be used to create propaganda. And I suppose on the reserve, the social media, a lot of people introduce information that's not, you know, that's not necessarily correct, you know, and that's one of the things that you know are, it's really risky to go on social media and to introduce information unless it's credible and it's, you know,
yeah,
correct. And then
yeah.
a lot of people, like, it's funny, you have we have some of the members of the tribe Nitsitapi, sometimes for some reason it gets posted on the social media that they passed away, and that happened to one of my friends. And I thought, geez, he's gone, he's passed away. Then about 3 months later he called me, and I told him, geez, I thought you had passed away, but I saw something on
Oh,
that said, and he said, no, I'm alive and well. And there was another person that had the same name as him, and
oh,
one that passed away, and he said, I'm trying to convince people that I'm still here, I'm still alive. So
oh my goodness.
you have to be very careful, you know, the information you get.
Yeah,
You can't believe everything that you hear or see on social
yeah,
media.
yeah, yeah. Um, I want to go back to your awards, your two films. Um, are they available for us to, like, would you be willing for us to stream them on our at the library so we could see what they, I bet there's a lot of people that haven't seen them, including myself.
Yeah,
How do
there's
you get that?
I'm not sure, this would have been, at least 35 years ago, and they were done, they were produced on videotape. And I'm pretty sure, see, those were done through the Global TV. We had rented their production facilities, and then they had the masters. They sat there for the longest time, and just I think about 3 years ago, somebody from the Global Television asked me, "Is it okay if we release these tapes to the Galt Museum?" So there's a chance the Galt Museum has some of those. Two-Way Street, that was a production that we had done. It was aimed at children, the young people, to start promoting positive images of ourselves, to start learning the Blackfoot language, in pieces. But we didn't have the resources to continue. But back in the time, it was 1986, I think. We had produced a show that could have gone a long ways and taught Blackfoot language and just positive things, about ourselves, see. But it didn't go. We only produced one program. It was a pilot program, and we didn't get anybody interested in funding it. So that one is available on YouTube. Two-Way Street. I think you could catch most of it on there. My son Arnell had uploaded it, so sometimes I see clips of it. Some of those kids that were in that program are adults now, some of them reaching their 40s, I think.
Oh, maybe they're going to be grandparents pretty soon.
Yeah. And there's a film that National Film Board did with the late Pete Standing Alone.
Oh, yeah.
The Sun. That is one of the main films that people look at. And sadly enough, they should have done some continued and sort of did updates, because since that film was done, Pete Standing Alone was he was sort of just speculating that the Sundance camp would no longer be, that he said maybe in 10 years there'll be nothing, but actually it went the other way, and the Sundance camp started growing, and there was more participation, and that would be something to do a film about today. How needs to be, we've kind of survived. We've survived a lot of things. We could have been extinct. The Blackfoot culture, we were very close. But anyways, Pete was. I worked with him on a few films. He was really. He really. He was very influential in what I was doing in my film career. I worked with National Film Board. We worked with CBS Network in the States, and there was a few other films. After Indian News Media folded, I became unemployed, so I started a media production company doing small films, promotional films, and then also involved in the film industry that was happening in Calgary. There was a TV series called Lonesome Dove.
Oh, yeah.
It was a Western. And I worked on that on several, several shows there. Whenever they needed native set design, or, they called me. So I was able to get involved with them. And also there's a movie called Medicine River.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That was done in Calgary, but I worked on that one. That was really interesting. We got to do some of the on hands, the camera operation. They had these big, huge cameras, and it was shot on film. And nowadays, those kinds of things are shot with on video and not necessarily on film anymore, because the format is different. Film
Yeah.
is film is kind of getting obsolete. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was my career as a filmmaker during those years, the 90s, the late 80s. I had a chance to go to Italy to work on a film crew.
Mm.
There was a pretty big film with Jackie Chan, uh, Shanghai Noon. I worked on that one. I had a small company, and some of it was consultant work, and some of it was actual. When we were in Italy, there was a group of us that came from the tribe. There was Earl Healy, Leon Goodstriker, myself, and there was a lady, couple of people from Stony Reserve. But we worked in Italy, and we produced a camp. They brought all the teepees and all the props from Calgary to Italy. So we
Oh,
had to set up a camp there for the Western that they were shooting. It was all the dialogue was all in Italian.
oh, yeah.
When you look at the movie, it's all Italian, but they gave us a copy with English
Oh,
subtitles. And I guess that film really flopped.
oh,
So,
did it?
yeah, it was called
Oh, I watched it. I thought it was kind of interesting.
Mia West.
Oh,
Yeah, but yeah, on the Shanghai Noon, I got to meet Jackie Chan. We were sitting in the teepee with him, and we were just talking about teepee life. And then after the show was done, I got a message from the producers. They said Jackie Chan really likes that teepee he was in. He wants to buy one of those teepees to bring to Hong Kong.
oh,
So they gave him the teepee, and he took it to Hong Kong. Then after a
oh.
few weeks later, I got another call, and they said, we don't have any teepee poles. What can we do? So, and they said they had some bamboo poles.
Oh,
And I told them, just go ahead and use them. They should work because they're like teepee poles.
yeah.
But that was
Oh,
really
that's a good story. Yeah.
impressed that Jackie Chan was interested in, he wanted to stay in the teepee in Hong Kong.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's really interesting.
So yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty much my film career sort of ended when I went to work for the Blood Tribe Administration, and I couldn't do other jobs. I couldn't take contracts or anything because I was strictly employed by the tribe, and they wouldn't allow that. So for the past 20 years that I worked in the with the BTA, I didn't do any film projects or any other media projects except for the tribe.
Mm.
But now I'm retired, and I
Well,
just
maybe this
sit
is,
back and I look at the.
well, maybe this is your chance. Yeah.
But I'd love to do
Maybe
it. I
you're,
would love
maybe
to.
you'll be,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'd
maybe
love to
you'll be
do.
the one to,
I'd love to do some projects with language. You know,
Yeah,
that's one of the things I would like to see is, you know, use of technology to teach young people the language. You know, there's a lot of things that they will learn. It's a captive audience because most young people are into you know, or Facebook or you know own he did uh, every day he'd do a word, hey, introduce a word, and it was getting really popular. I would like to see something done, you know. I think young people would sure use that media to learn.
yeah, that's true. That's really true. It would be good if you could do that film about the Sundance when since you brought it up. So maybe that would be your project coming up.
Yeah,
Think about it anyways.
there's
Uh,
a number of there's a number of natives that are doing films that have gone to film school. There's a really good film production school in Vancouver where they teach Indigenous filmmakers, and also in Calgary at the SAIT. SAIT has an excellent media production program that people could go and learn. And you know, just recently there was a huge injection of money into the film industry in Calgary. You know, the provincial government's supporting the film business in Alberta, and that would be excellent time. You know, that's a good opportunity for anybody that's interested in media production to, you know, get some background, go out there and do it. You know, whatever project. I think anything is open with media. You can do it.
yeah, that's something I think the high school should take up. They could be get involved because Ramona's into a lot of that. Ramona Bighead, storytelling and you know, documenting things. So I think I'm going to talk with her next about what they do.
Oh
But it
yeah.
would be good to use local resources, I think, or like yourself, you have a lot of, maybe you could do a class or something at Red Crow, something like that. It's something to think about anyway, write a proposal to them
Yeah.
because I don't think they have media classes at Red Crow or anything like that. So, yeah. Um, Let me see. I just want to let you know that we partnered with the U of L, the library partnered with U of L, and we're actually showing all of the Pete Standing Alone films. There's 3 of them, and we're doing the last one on May the 7th, I believe. So if you know of anybody that would want to watch that, we'll
Oh yeah.
be live streaming it on May the 7th. I think it starts at 2 o'clock. It's a Friday anyway, but there'll be some posters out on our webpage. So yeah, and we're looking for other films. That's why I was interested in yours, if we could live stream them to get those, and maybe as we get going, and then you could be the guest again. That would be good.
Yeah,
Anyway,
golf.
I'll look into that and see what.
I think golf
Yeah,
museum has
yeah, that.
most of, you know, there was two TV shows that we were involved in. One of them is called the Buffalo Journal, and those were you know, news stories. And then there was another one called uh, the Sweetgrass Review, that's the one that I did without help of anybody. We had to, you know, produce that from our own place. We had done 12 programs, Sweetgrass Review, and Galt Museum, I'm pretty sure has those programs. They're half-hour programs, but the news of the time is really outdated now. You know, back then we had just started talking about Indian residential school, and there was not much happening back then. But after 1980, I think it was about 1990 actually, when things started to change and they formed the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and there was big news about what happened in the residential schools. And then there was a big payout by the government with all these residential school survivors claiming payments. Though that happened all after, you know, but at the time, you know, there was a lot of people that had stories to tell. They wanted to share. A lot of them being very negative. It's about trauma that was inflicted on them, and some of those stories, they're not good. You know, they document a really dark period in our history, and I think we're past that. We're finally moving on from what's happened back, you know, when residential schools were still prevalent. Most Indigenous people are moving on from it, you know, but it's still, you know, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, it still plays a role right now today. And a lot of what happened, you know, it's being recorded and documented, and the stories are being saved so that, you know, their future generations can hear some of those stories and actually learn.
Okay, so I think we're just about at the end here. We'll be putting this out, just so you know. I'm gonna just hang on here. Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us. Just to let you know that today's presentation was Indigenous Conversations, Media and More on the Blood Reserve, featuring Rick Tailfeathers. Rick gave us a very good overview and his involvement over the past 40 years, I believe. So we really want to thank Rick for taking his time to record for us and to share with us. Our next Indigenous conversation will center around people who are planning businesses regarding their arts, using their Indigenous arts like high tanning, drum making, and so on. So watch for that at the end of this month. Okay, everyone, have a great day.